Hey everybody, welcome to the videos for my first look for week 2 of the NFL season over on Draftkings. All I do in this video is I took a handful of players at each position group that stood out to me the most early on in the week, and I threw them in the player pool here for you guys, and we'll go over the prices, the matchups, and the numbers that we have available to us. And then we'll have a more in-depth breakdown later on the week in my final thoughts video, which should be up on Friday. Then on my core plays video posted on Saturday night or Sunday morning. That's my short, sweet, to the point video, which is usually around 10 to 15 minutes. And these videos tend to run a little bit longer because I have a large player group, and it's just my first thoughts on the entire week. So nothing too crazy in depth here, but that'll be later on in the week. But before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, you might as well hit that subscribe button. And we're all season long trying to help you guys become better NFL DFS players, and I cover other sports as well. So if you're going to keep coming back to the channel each and every single day, or each and every single week, you might as well hit that subscribe button and turn the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new videos. And if you don't follow me on social media, my handles are in the bottom left hand corner of your screen. And if you want some more content over on Patreon, always much appreciated. We got 300 plus people. You can hop into the Discord chat, or you can just get access to all the extra content that I put out, including my entire NFL DFS data sheet and my cheat sheet and all that fun stuff as well, with notes on all the players that I have interest in. So if you're interested, links down below. If not, hey, that's fine. Let's just dive into this week's slate. And we'll start up top here with Lamar Jackson at 8,200. As always, he's pretty much going to be our most expensive quarterback, and I don't typically like spending top dollar for quarterback, but I say this each and every single time, but it's applicable every single time. You're getting pretty much two players on your roster, Lamar Jackson. You're getting a QB1, and for the most part, an RB1 too, because if you're looking at his numbers last season, he was averaging nearly 10 rushing attempts per game and nearly 80 rushing yards per game. If you're looking at how he did week 1, he pretty much did all of his damage through the air. He threw 3 touchdowns, didn't throw a pick, only had 25 passing attempts, but he was pretty efficient. He had 11 yards per attempt, 275 passing yards, and an 80% completion percentage. Now, his numbers on the ground, he didn't really have to do too much. I mean, he was just doing fine just through the air, but 5 rushing attempts for 45 yards, still 6.4 yards per carry, and 152 QBR rating last week versus the Cleveland Browns. It's kind of what we expected from Lamar Jackson. He did pretty much exactly what we thought he would do. He did a little bit of damage on the ground. Probably thought he would have done a little bit more in the rushing game, but he was just fine through the air with nearly 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. And this is a pretty juicy over-under here. 52.5 point over-under, which is going to be the highest on this slate. And the Ravens also have the highest team total as well, and 6.5 point favorites. This is a very good matchup versus Houston. If you're looking at their numbers last season versus quarterbacks answer the pass, they were 26 DVA versus the pass, allowed over 23 Draftkings points per game, 280 passing yards, over 2 passing touchdowns. And look, Lamar Jackson, he can do anything. I mean, anything he wants pretty much on the football field. If he wants to throw it deep, he can throw it deep. If he wants to throw it over the middle, he can throw it over the middle. If he wants to run all over the opposing defense, he can do that as well. And Houston also really struggled versus the run too, so that's just another added bonus for Lamar Jackson. Not like he even needed it. But Lamar Jackson is in a smash spot here. There's going to be a lot of points scored here from the Ravens, and for the most part, it's usually from Lamar Jackson, whether it's through the air or from his leg. So definitely an awesome option. He's going to be the QB1 on this slate. I don't think he's an absolute must because we also have some pretty decent QBs as well that are lower priced, like Kyler Murray. Even Dak Prescott's over $1,000 cheaper, and also a 52 point over-under. So I don't think you have to pay up for Lamar Jackson, but he's definitely a very safe option, and you can usually lock in close to 30 DraftKings points any single time you roster Lamar. So definitely the QB1 on this slate, but I don't think he's an absolute must. But Dak Prescott, 6,800. This is going to be a very good game for fantasy purposes. We have a 5-point spread here, which is a little lopsided to the Dallas Cowboys, but this should be pretty back and forth for the most part. Matt Ryan is a competent quarterback, and Atlanta's got a very high-powered offense with Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, I guess even Todd Gurley, and Hayden Hurst as well. So this game should be pretty back and forth, and we should see some fireworks as well. We're also in a dome, so we don't have to worry about any weather issues. So yeah, definitely like Dak Prescott here. Atlanta's defense is not really something to be too concerned about. They kind of got shredded by Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks last week, and I don't know if they're going to give up that many points again, but I mean, Vegas is certainly expecting the Cowboys to put up some points. They got a solid run game. Dak's got a lot of good options to throw the ball to, including CeeDee Lamb. You also have Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup, and even Zeke Elliott in the passing game. He scored a passing touchdown last week as well. Not really expecting him to be a huge factor in the passing game, but he's got a lot of options to throw the ball to. He did lose Blake Jarwin, but overall, Dak should be fine here. If you're looking at Atlanta's numbers last season versus the past, they were 25th DVOA, over 20 DraftKings points per game, nearly 2 passing touchdowns per game, So I think Dak's going to be just fine. I definitely love this game for fantasy purposes. Matt Ryan on the other side of this game, he's 6,600. He threw the ball 54 times in his last game. That's kind of on par with what he did last year. He threw the ball well over 40 times per game last season, and I mean, why not? They have so many good passing options, and Julio Jones and Calvin really just get those to the ball, and usually good things happen. So Matt Ryan, I think he's obviously a fine option here, and he's also going to be a positive game script for the most part because they are 5-point dogs on the road, so I would expect them to have to throw the ball quite a bit once again. And there should be fireworks here, 52-point over-under, so this is definitely going to be a very hot spot for fantasy points in week 2, and definitely would like to get some exposure to it. So definitely Dak Prescott and both Matt Ryan. If I had to pick one or the other, I would start with Dak Prescott just because I'm kind of like that 28.5 implied team total, but both options are totally fine here. Then going down to Tom Brady at 6,500, not really someone I love to use for DFS purposes, but he gets a really soft matchup versus Carolina. It looks like they're going to have one of the worst defenses in the league this season. I mean, they lost so many guys from last year, and they weren't even good last season, so this is definitely going to be a very beatable defense, and Tom Brady's got 2 elite options in Chris Godwin and Mike Evans to throw the ball to, so I think this is just purely a matchup play and just I mean, he's got elite weapons to throw the ball to, so I think it's just pretty simple there. I wouldn't say he's my most favorite QB option just because he doesn't really offer us much rushing upside. And they're also 9-point favorites as well, so I could see them getting Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette the ball quite a bit, so I'm not really sure how much they're going to have to lean on Tom Brady, but it's a very soft matchup here, and I could easily see 250 and 2 touchdowns from him, although I'd hope for a little bit more at 6,500, but I still think he's fine. Probably my favorite QB option on the entire slate is Kyler Murray at 6,100. He's kind of Lamar Jackson light, and he did a lot of damage on the ground last week. If we just scroll over to the numbers really quick, he only had 230 passing yards and 1 passing touchdown, but if you're looking at the rushing numbers, he had 13 rushing attempts, 91 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown, and look, he looked fantastic. He was great for DFS purposes. He has a wide receiver 1 in DeAndre Hopkins that he's pretty much a safety valve for him, so I think Kyler Murray at 6,100 versus the Washington football team is an excellent choice, and he's probably going to end up being the chalk quarterback for the most part, because I know when I was scrolling through DK looking at the prices, Kyler Murray was the guy that stood out to me the most. Passes the eye test, the offense plays super fast, there's obviously more opportunity the more plays they run. And even though Washington's defense actually looked pretty solid, I know they got a good defensive line. I mean, Carson Wentz did do some damage early on, but I mean, he kind of just fell apart in the second half, and the Eagles are pretty battered with injuries, especially on the offensive line, so I don't think they're going to look too great here versus Arizona. And Kyler Murray, he's got the weapons. He's got the rushing upside at 6,100. I like him quite a bit. And you get over a $2,000 discount from Lamar Jackson. And it's going to be hard. I'm going to be hard-pressed not to play Kyler Murray in cash games this week. I mean, it's just the price is nice, and I love that rushing upside. He's also a very talented quarterback as well. Then going down to Ryan Tannehill at 5,900, I prefer using the run game here. I never loved playing Ryan Tannehill for DFS because the Titans are a run-first team, but he threw the ball 43 times last night, which is not something I would have expected. And the crazy thing is Derrick Henry also had over 30 rushing attempts, so they ran a ton of plays last night. But this Jacksonville defense is nothing to be scared of. He's got good options in Jonnu Smith, A.J. Brown, and Corey Davis. Corey Davis looked pretty darn good last night. But if you're looking at the numbers last season, they were 22nd DVA versus the pass, 19K points per game to quarterbacks, and I expect these numbers to probably get worse this season. And they also have a huge offensive line versus defensive line pass blocking matchup according to PFF this week, so that's another advantage for him. So I think Tannehill's fine, even though I would prefer the run game here, because I think Derrick Henry's going to absolutely smash versus Jacksonville. But I think Tannehill's fine at this price tag. And then Phillip Rivers at 5,900, the same amount of money. I think he's going to be a very good punt option here. Not really for $200 more, I can get up to Kyler Murray and lock in that rushing upside, but I like Paris Campbell and T.Y. Hilton quite a bit in this game. So obviously, if I like them, I have to like Phillip Rivers as well. And if you're looking at what he did last week, he threw the ball 46 times, had a 78% completion percentage, and had 363 passing yards. Only 1 passing touchdown, but if he can toss us at least 250 and 2, I would take that at 1,500, but I think there's upside for more. We know Phillip Rivers has no problems chucking it. And Minnesota's defense got absolutely shredded by Aaron Rodgers last week. I mean, him and Devontae Adams just absolutely torched them, and this pass defense is probably not going to be something we should shy away from this season, so I think Phillip Rivers at 5,900 is totally going to be fine here, and I think we can just move on to the running backs at this point. And up top, for obvious reasons, we have Christian McCaffrey, and CMC continued his trend of just pretty much doing every single thing for the Panthers. I mean, looking at the numbers we did last week, he had 96 rushing yards, just missed that 100-yard bonus, which I was very upset about. Had 2 rushing touchdowns, 4.2 yards per carry. Wasn't as involved in the passing game as I would have liked. He only had 4 targets and only 38 receiving yards. Last year, we saw him at 8.5 targets per game. So when you're playing CMC last year, you're pretty much getting an RB1 and a fringe fringe wide receiver 1, or a wide receiver 2. But I'd have to expect those passing numbers to go up. And even if they don't, he's still fine because he's going to get all the work on the ground. He had 23 rushing attempts, 11% target share, and a 19 weighted opportunity share. So, CMC, he's going to be the RB1 each and every single week, but I don't think he's a must-play here. Tampa Bay is very tough on running backs. I know Alvin Kamara scored a couple of times last week, but he didn't do too much damage in the yardage department. And it was actually versus Tampa Bay. I think it was on a Thursday night game. CMC had his worst game of the entire season. They just absolutely shut him down. Now, I don't think he's going to get shut down here. He's obviously pretty much the best running back in football, especially for DFS purposes. But at $10,000 versus one of the best rush defenses in the entire league, if we're looking at those numbers last year, they were third DVA versus the run, only allowed 17 DK points per game, and only 56 rushing yards. So I think CMC, obviously, he's going to be a good volume play. He's going to get the ball close to 30 times almost every single week. He's going to be involved in the passing game, but definitely not a must-play at $10,000 because I think there's some other good options at cheaper price points and better matchups as well. So CMC, I like him from a volume perspective, but I don't think he's a must-play. But going down to Zeke here, 8,200, he's going to be an awesome play here versus Atlanta. There's a huge over-under in this game at 52. They have a 28.5 implied team total, and they're 5-point favorites at home. So I think this kind of screams Zeke's going to get the ball a bunch of times. In his last game versus the Rams, he had 22 rushing attempts, 96 rushing yards, had a rushing touchdown, also had 4 targets for 31 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown as well, which was encouraging to see. This is a pretty soft matchup versus Atlanta. We saw Chris Carson get in the end zone a couple of times versus them, and Zeke Elliott, one of the best running backs in the league. We know he's going to get his 20-plus touches, and this is going to be a pretty good offense. Dallas has a lot of good options, and Vegas likes this game a lot. So definitely think there's going to be a heavy dose of Zeke here, and I think he's an excellent option. You get $1,800 in savings from Christian McCaffrey, and I'd rather play Zeke over CMC this week, so I really don't think there's a reason to have to force yourself to play CMC at that insanely high price tag. And then going down to Derrick Henry at $7,900. If you want to spend up for Zeke and Derrick Henry as your 2-stud RBs on this slate, I have no issue with that at all. These guys are in just great spots, but I love Derrick Henry here. Once again, he got over 30 rushing attempts in his last game. They are just force-feeding this guy the ball, and he can handle that heavy workload. The guy is just an absolute monster. He's a freight train, and he's just going to wear defenses down. As the game progresses, it's just harder and harder to tackle that guy. We saw that last night for Denver. But yeah, Derrick Henry, the volume is as safe as it's going to get. He's not really involved in the passing game. He did have 3 targets, which was nice, and 15 receiving yards, but it wasn't anything too crazy. But Jacksonville, we know this is going to be one of the worst defenses in the league this year. And versus the run last season, they were horrendous, kind of right on par with the Carolina Panthers, but they were 31st DVA versus the run, allowed over 30 DK points per game, 118 rushing yards, and 1.13 rushing touchdowns per game. And Derrick Henry has a knack for destroying the Jaguars. But this game just sets up super well for him. They are 9-point favorites at home, and this just screams Derrick Henry is going to get nearly 200 rushing yards and over 30 rushing attempts. So I know he's not really involved in the passing game, but he doesn't really need to be. He should be able to destroy the Jaguars on the ground. They're going to rely on him pretty much the entire game, and it would not surprise me if he gets double-digit rushing touchdowns here. So love Derrick Henry at $7,900. Clyde Edwards-Helaire at $7,400. Really didn't do anything at all in the passing game on Thursday night. Only had 1 target, no receptions, but didn't really need to. He was just fine on the ground. He also got a lot of goal line carries as well. Now, he didn't convert any of them, but he still looked pretty darn good. He had 25 rushing attempts for 138 rushing yards, and if you were just watching the game, just looking at the film of it, he looked good. And I remember he made that 1 jump cut. It was awesome. And he also scored as well. And being the RB1 for the Chiefs is always going to be a very lucrative position, and they are 8.5-point favorites here on the road versus the Chargers, but a 27.75 implied team total, and he should get the rock 20-plus times, and I would expect him to be more involved in the passing game, so definitely Helaire here at $7,400. I will say I'd prefer to skip to Zeke and Derrick Henry, but if you want to pivot off of those guys, I have no problems here with Helaire. And then if you want to go a little bit cheaper, Kenyon Drake at $5,900. He had 16 rushing attempts in his last game. And I know this Redskins defensive line looked pretty darn good, but they are 6.5-point favorites at home. And we know Kenyon Drake's a very talented running back. And again, this team plays very fast. There should be a lot of opportunities for him. And I think he should be totally fine at this price tag. I would look at the matchup last year, but things have changed on this defensive line. Like last year, the football team really struggled versus running backs. 23 DVA versus the run, 30 DK points per game, and 123 rushing yards. They've definitely improved, and PFF doesn't really like the run blocking matchup here. They're actually at a negative 19% run blocking, disadvantage this week versus the Washington football team. But 5,900. I'll take the talent there, and I think he's going to be fine. Jonathan Taylor, 5,700, probably going to be pretty popular this week, but with the loss of Marlon Mack, he's going to be the RB1 here. He was named the starter, and I gotta say, I'm pretty excited about it. He was really involved in the passing game, too, which was nice to see. Now, Nyheim Hines is going to be involved in this game, but there's enough room for both of them to do well, especially at this price point of only 5,700. But look, Philip Rivers, the dump-off king. He had 6 targets in his last game with 67 receiving yards and a 13% target share. Looking at the rushing numbers, again, Marlon Mack was also playing in this game at some point, so you can't really put too much stock into that. But Jonathan Taylor should see around 20 touches in this game, and I'll take that versus the Vikings. I would say they're worse versus the pass than they are versus the run, but look, he should be involved in the passing game. I like the price point. If you're going to give me around 20 touches at 5,700 with the team total of 25.25 as a 3-point favorite at home, I'll be pretty interested. So I definitely like Jonathan Taylor. And then we'll move on to the wide receivers. And it's very obvious, but it's Davante Adams at 8,100. And I honestly don't see a scenario how you can just fade him in cash games. I think you absolutely have to find a way to play Adams this week because, I feel like he's going to be like Michael Thomas this season. We saw how good he was versus Minnesota last week. And I think we can see similar things here again versus Detroit. He's got a very, very bad pass defense. And Adams almost saw 20 targets last week. It was insane. Let's look at these numbers. They're very, very, very impressive. He had 2 receiving touchdowns on 17 targets, 156 receiving yards, a 41% target share, 87% weighted opportunity share, nearly 50% of the team's air yards. And look, he was just absolutely incredible. And he's really the only guy Aaron Rodgers can trust in that passing game. So I don't see how we can fade Davante Adams. And that's one of the big reasons why I don't want to have to force myself to play a CMC, because if I play him CMC and then I want to play Derrick Henry, I'm not going to be able to fit in Adams, and I think Adams is one of the top priorities on this slate. The volume's going to be there. It's a very good matchup versus Detroit. If you're looking at their numbers last season, they were 29th DVA versus the pass, a little over 40 DK points per game to wide receivers, nearly 200 receiving yards, and over a touchdown per game. And Davante Adams is pretty much going to be the only guy doing anything for Aaron Rodgers for the most part. I know Lazard scored, and some other guys can get some work in too, but Davante Adams is the guy we can trust. You can pretty much pencil him in for well over 10 targets, and look, he's going to be the guy here. I'll see how you're going to stop him. So love Davante Adams, one of the top plays, if not the top play on the entire slate, and I don't think you can fade him in cash games this week. I'd really try to find a way to get him in. Then Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, I think both are fine options here. Probably not going to try to plug them in cash games, especially over Davante Adams. But look, Carolina's defense is just going to be so bad this season, I'm pretty sure. And, I think Godwin and Evans should have a huge advantage here for the most part. They are very talented wide receivers, and Mike Evans should be decently healthy for this game. So I'm just kind of lumping these guys together. I'm not really going over them individually. If you look at Mike Evans' numbers, he typically does get locked down by the Saints. Him and Marshawn Lattimore, he just really struggles versus him. And he's also dealing with an injury in this game, so I'm not going to put too much in the stock into it. He did catch a touchdown late, but Chris Godwin, he had 7 targets for 79 receiving yards and 20% target share. But both these guys are fine. It's a very soft matchup versus Carolina, and I think we can certainly use them in GPP formats, but I'm probably not going their way in cash games. If I'm playing Adams and I'm playing 2 stud running backs, not going to probably be able to fit a lot of these guys in the 7 to 6K range, but these guys are fine for tournaments. Although you can make a case for Amari Cooper in cash games at 6,300. He saw 13 targets last week, had a 37% target share, 88% weighted opportunity share, and a 44% share of the team's air yards, 81 receiving yards as well. In this game should be fireworks here, and I love Dallas, and I think he's an excellent pairing with Dak Prescott. And you could certainly run that stack back with someone like Julio Jones or Calvin Ridley on the other side of that game. I'm a big fan of Amari Cooper here. I think he's a bit underpriced as well at only 6,300. So definitely like Amari Cooper this week. It's going to grade out as a pretty good value at that price point. A.J. Brown at 6,100. Not usually a high volume guy. He did see 7 targets, but I can't expect the Titans to throw the ball 43 times every single game. Now, if they do, A.J. Brown at 6,100 is going to be a pretty good play here, especially versus a very weak Jacksonville defense. but I can't see that being the case, and I think this is going to be pretty much the Derrick Henry show. But if you are using Ryan Tannehill, it probably makes sense to pair it up with some of his receivers like A.J. Brown or Corey Davis or even Jonnu Smith, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But A.J. Brown, he's the big play guy, and I think he's totally fine here. Was not all that impressive on Monday night, but overall we know the talent's there, and this is a pretty good spot here versus Jacksonville, which just is not going to have a great defense this season. Then Terry McLaurin at 5,900. If you're using Kyler, if you want to use DeAndre Hopkins, I'm not really too interested in using DeAndre because I want to use Devontae Adams. But if you're stacking up some of the Arizona Cardinals, I think running it back with Terry McLaurin is probably a pretty decent option here, especially if you want to have them, especially if you want their foot on the gas the entire game. You're kind of hoping someone on the Washington football team does something resemblance of having a good game, and I think Terry McLaurin's probably got the best shot at that, so I think he's fine just as a run back with Kyler Murray, or just from a volume standpoint. I mean, if you're looking at his numbers, he only had 7 targets, but a 23% target share. We can usually expect around 7 to 10 targets for Terry McLaurin each and every single week, so I think he's fine versus Arizona. T.Y. Hilton at 5,700, probably going to end up being one of the more popular plays on the entire slate, but it's for good reason. Him and Paris Campbell are in a very good spot here, and Minnesota just got absolutely torched last week versus the Green Bay Packers, so I think T.Y. Hilton is in an excellent spot here, and he always plays better at home in the Dome as well. If you just look at his splits, he's been much better at home here, and you got Phillip Rivers slinging on the ball, so I definitely like T.Y. Hilton, like that price tag as well. One of my favorite plays on this slate as of right now. Had an 8 out of 12.1 in this last game, 109 air yards, only had a 19% target share, but 9 targets, 53 receiving yards. I think he's going to be a very good option here. I don't mind stacking him up with Phillip Rivers. And if you want to stack Phillip Rivers and his 2 pass catchers, you could run that back with Adam Thielen. I know I don't have Adam Thielen listed here, but I think that would make sense in tournaments. And this game has a pretty healthy 47.5 point over-under with a tight 3-point spread. So I think this game is certainly stackable. But yeah, like T.Y. Hilton, I also like Paris Campbell as well. He's 4,500. He ran 95% of his routes in the slot last game. And look, I mean, the Vikings just got absolutely shredded last week versus the pass, and I don't know if it's going to be as bad this time around, but I still think it's a very beatable pass defense. They did struggle versus wide receivers last season, and that held true once again. They were 7th EVA versus the pass, but they allowed 37 DraftKings points per game to wide receivers, 167 receiving yards, and over a touchdown per game. And I love this price point on Campbell. Very nice salary relief option, and he's obviously a fine pairing with Phillip Rivers. Then Corey Davis at 4,000. He impressed me, and I actually played him in my cash lineup for some reason on the Monday night game. It was very iffy. He was the last fit option. He was 5% owned. I didn't feel great about it, but it ended up working out. I did not expect over 100 receiving yards from Corey Davis, but he looked pretty good, and they were getting him the ball. Now, I don't expect the Titans to the ball like 40-plus times like they did last night, but, I mean, the guy looked good. What do you have, 8 targets, I believe? Yeah, 8 targets, 101 receiving yards, had a 41% share of the team's air yards, 59% weighted opportunity share, 20% target share, and 11.9 ADOT as well. So Corey Davis was pretty impressive. This is a good matchup versus the Jaguars. So I think at that price point, it's fine, but I would really try to get the $500 extra for Paris Campbell if you were digging this deep at wide receiver. All right, now we'll move on to the tight ends, which are never as fun as the running backs and wide receivers. But I have the 3 big options here in Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, and Zach Ertz. If you got the money for them, great. I mean, Travis Kelce, I wouldn't say the matchup versus the Chargers is very good. They were pretty tough versus tight ends last season, but it's also Travis Kelce. He's pretty much the best tight end in football. He's got the best quarterback in football throwing him the ball. And the Chiefs are always going to put up a lot of points pretty much each and every single week, and they're always going to be respected in Vegas as well. They have a team total of nearly 28 in this game. And even though I don't love the matchup, it is Travis Kelce. He can always drop that 100-yard game with 10 catches and 2 touchdowns just because he's got Patrick Mahomes throwing him the ball. Now, in his first game, he was not throwing the ball down the field at all. He had 14 air yards and an ADOT of 2.3. I had to double-check the numbers, but I checked multiple sources, and this was correct. So that was very ugly, but he had an 18% target share. He had 6 targets and 50 yards, and he really did nothing in the second half, but they did have control of that game for the most part. But Travis Kelce, I mean, best tight end in football. He's fine if you got the money for him, but definitely not a necessity on this slate in the slightest, and I typically like to spend down a bit at tight end. Mark Andrews at 6,300. He had 2 touchdowns in his first start versus the Cleveland Browns. And if you are stacking with Lamar Jackson, I don't think you have to by any means. He can certainly one of the only quarterbacks you can use naked and feel comfortable about it. No, I say that, but you can use others like Kyler Murray, and there's other scenarios. But mostly you want to stack a receiving option with your quarterback. Lamar Jackson, absolutely not needed, but Mark Andrews is probably one of the best guys to do with, or Marquise Brown. but I feel a bit safer with Mark Andrews here, and it's a pretty good matchup versus Houston. They did struggle versus tight ends last year. If you're looking at their numbers, over 13 DK points per game, 54 receiving yards, and they were 26 DVA versus the pass as well. He also has a huge tight end versus safety matchup according to PFF. But if you look at the numbers in his last start, a 24% target share, 53% weighted opportunity share, and an ADOT of 10.3. And he's obviously a fine option here. The Ravens do have the highest team total on the slate, and it's also the highest over-under as well. And if the Texans can keep this game close and the Ravens have to throw the ball, Mark Andrews should have a pretty big game here, as well as Lamar Jackson. And even Marquise Brown, too, even though he didn't make the sheet. I thought he was a bit expensive, but above 6K. But I definitely don't mind Mark Andrews. Then Zach Ertz at 5,600. I think he's a fine option as well. Now, the volume was nice for him. He had 7 targets, but only had 18 receiving yards. Fortunately enough, he got into the end zone for fantasy owners, but look, he's one of the best tight ends in football. I think he is totally fine here. If you're looking at the matchup last season versus the pass, the Rams were 10th DVA versus the pass, allowed over 12 DK points per game to tight ends and 56 receiving yards. Nothing to get too excited about, but it's Zach Ertz. Carson Wentz likes using his tight ends. We saw Dallas Goedert have a pretty good game as well, so Ertz certainly viable at that price point. Hayden Hurst was a bit of a disappointment in his first start versus Seattle, but I don't mind going back to the well here versus Dallas. Dallas did struggle versus tight ends last season. If you're looking at their numbers, they were 23rd DVA versus the pass, allowed over 15 DK points per game to tight ends, and over 63 receiving yards. And Hayden Hurst, even though he wasn't that impressive, I mean, Matt Ryan threw the ball over 50 times in his last game, and he's going to be involved. He's going to see his targets. He had 5 in the first game, only had 38 receiving yards, and only a 9% target share, but look, there's going to be a lot of points scored here. The Falcons, once again, are more than likely going to throw the ball over 40, 45 times. And Hayden Hurst, if he can get 5 to 7 targets here, I think he'll be fine at 4,600. You're just kind of hoping he falls into the end zone because I don't really think he's going to be a big yardage type of guy. Johnny Smith at 4,200. He looked pretty good last night versus the Broncos. Did end up catching a touchdown, if I remember correctly. Yeah, he had a touchdown. He had 7 targets as well, which was nice. Only 36 receiving yards and 8 out of 1.9, which is pretty gross, and only a 5% team share of the team's air yards. But he's an okay option here. Could definitely squeak his way into the end zone, and Jacksonville's defense is definitely not something I'm going to run away from. And if you are using Ryan Tannehill, pairing up with someone like Johnny Smith is a pretty cheap pairing as well. Nothing exciting, but he's a cheap tight end that is viable. Then Logan Thomas, kind of a surprise. He had 8 targets last week from Dwayne Haskins, only 37 receiving yards, but he did find the end zone. Had 26% target share, a 60% weighted opportunity share. And he's getting the ball down the field, too, and he had an 8 out of 9 and a 29% share of the team's air yards. So Logan Thomas at 3,600 and a good matchup versus Arizona. I know George Kittle didn't really do too much week 1, and the Cardinals probably aren't going to be as bad versus the tight end position as they were last season. I would assume they did things to fix that. But still, they sucked versus tight ends last season, and it's only a 1-game sample size, so we'll see. Now, I know the sample size was against one of the best tight ends in football, but the 8 targets last week were encouraging. He's only 3,600, so I think he's fine, but I do not expect a lot from the Washington football team here. Team total of only 19.75, but they are 6.5-point dogs, and they should have to throw the ball quite a bit here. So I don't mind Logan Thomas at that price point. And then as for the defenses, I mean, there's really nothing exciting to talk about defenses, and you kind of just hope you get lucky with turnovers and sacks for the most part. But I pretty much just listed teams here that have low implied team totals against them. The 49ers, I mean, one of the better defenses in all of football, only 17.75 implied team total against them. The Bills, also a very strong defense, going up against a pretty poor Miami squad. And then you have the Bucks, which are a pretty solid defense. Now, I wouldn't say I want to really pick on Carolina, but they are 9-point dogs at home and only 2,900. I think they'll be fine, and they are very tough versus the run. And the Panthers' best asset is Christian McCaffrey. So if they can stop him, they should be okay. Just kind of stop Robbie Anderson on the outside and DJ Moore as well. Then the Giants, don't really want to use the Giants' defense, but they are going up against Mitch Trubisky, who is definitely prone to making dumb mistakes. So at 2,400, he's okay. I mean, they are okay. Now they have 24 implied team totals, 24-point team total against them, and they are 5.5-point dogs here on the road in Chicago. So I don't love the spot, but I don't mind the price tag. And that's pretty much going to be it for this video, guys. I don't love talking about defenses, so don't put too much stock into this. Just play pretty much whoever fits at the end, as long as it's not an absolute trash defense with a team total of 30 against them. But that's going to be it for the video. I appreciate each and every single one of you guys watching. If you want to follow me on Twitter, the handles are down below. If you want to follow me on Instagram as well, if you want to support my content over on Patreon, the link's down below as well. If you haven't already, make sure you leave a like on the video. And like I said, if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. I really do appreciate it. That's going to be it. I'll have my Thursday Night Football Showdown video posted tomorrow. My Browns are playing, so I'm pretty excited for the game, although they are a big disappointment each and every single year, so I do not have my hopes up for them. But that's pretty much it. I have my final thoughts video on Friday, core plays video Saturday or Sunday, and then all of the NASCAR content as well, and MLB if you guys are interested. So with that, I am going to head out of here, and I'll stop talking.